Two previously hidden pages of Anne Frank's diary were decrypted, revealing fresh information on the little girl whose tragic words had reverberated for decades. Historians and the public were intrigued. Anne Frank, a symbol of innocence during the Holocaust, wrote with young wonder and great insight about her experiences sheltering from Nazi persecution. These newly revealed pages expose her ideas on difficult themes like sexuality and her own growing femininity, which she hid with brown paper. The revelation enhances our knowledge of Anne's personal growth and highlights her diary's lasting value as a monument to human tenacity and the desire for freedom in the face of inconceivable suffering. We'll explore Anne Frank's life, the newest finds, and how her tale has inspired and educated generations worldwide. She was born in Germany but grew up in the Netherlands. Frankfurt, Germany was the birthplace of Anne Frank in 1929. She was 3 years older than her sister. When she was born, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler and his party were becoming more and more powerful in Germany, and anti-Semitism was spreading across the nation. Hitler held Jews responsible for all national ills, and as the country's economy deteriorated and became more precarious, an increasing number of his followers seemed to be joining his divisive rhetoric. Anne Frank's parents, Edith and Otto Frank, decided to relocate to Amsterdam, Netherlands, in order to avoid the everyday anti-Semitism they encountered. At the time, many Jews would have made this choice in hopes that the anti-Semitic environment and acts of violence in the Netherlands would change. They were a liberal Jewish family. Otto went on to establish his own business in Amsterdam, dealing with pectin, a gelling substance used in jam production. He had served as a lieutenant in the German army during World War I, thus this was a significant personal shift for him. The Frank family had a liberal Jewish upbringing since they did not adhere to Orthodox Jewish rituals and practices. There were many other cultures and faiths represented in the diverse area where they resided, including Jews and non-Jews coexisting together. The family relocated to Poets Quarter 2 years after Anne was born, leaving their 2-story rental house behind. Both of these homes are still standing today. Anne and her sister were enrolled in different schools. Anne attended a school different from her sisters in the Netherlands. When Anne enrolled at Amsterdam's 6th Montessori school at the age of almost 5, her sister Margaret was enrolled in a public school. Like her neighborhood, 6th Montessori school accepted children of many ethnicities and beliefs, so Anne would have the opportunity to meet friends from all over the world there. Anne's close acquaintances from those days have said that she had a passion for writing from a very early age. However, she would want to keep all of her writing private and would keep it private from everybody. New pages about Anne's sexual explorations are revealed. Since their first release, Anne's diaries have been revised to include previously removed passages that focus on her investigation of her sexuality, musings on menstruation, and genital exploration. Pages deleted by Otto Frank are currently absent from subsequent copies after the settlement of an ownership dispute in 2001. These chapters illuminate her difficult connection with her mother and provide genuine observations about the tumultuous marriage of her parents. 2 more pages that have been hidden under brown paper were uncovered and decoded in 2018. These pages include a collection of comically risque and dirty jokes, as well as an effort to teach sex education. Anne and Margot were encouraged to write and read by their parents. Some would say that young Anne had a knack for writing. Her parents encouraged her and her sister to read and write at home. Their father even constructed a home library for the group. Nobody else could write as well as Anne could about an item, pointing out details that only she could notice. She used to write in her journal about an old horse chestnut tree from the annex, noting every little detail. The horse chestnut tree eventually came to be associated most strongly with the Frank family and the Holocaust, to the point that it was almost revered. The tree deteriorated with the years. Regretfully, the tree's extensive degeneration meant that it was slated for removal in 2007. After years, infestations by fungi and moths remained consistent, making it very difficult to maintain the tree. Despite its declining state, there was disagreement among many over whether to remove it, leading to the start of a legal lawsuit to preserve it. It benefited from the tremendous attention the lawsuit action received on a global scale, since the tree was ultimately spared. Sadly, gale force winds finally brought the tree down, despite the fact that steel supports had been erected on it to prolong its life. The family attempted to flee the Netherlands. The Franks made an unsuccessful effort to emigrate to the United States or England before the start of World War II. Approximately 300,000 Jews left Germany during the same period and continued to do so for 6 years until the war. The family was still living in the same area in the Netherlands on September 1, 1939, when World War II began, and anti-Semitic violence was only becoming worse. At the time, Anne was just 10 years old. The Frank family was still imprisoned in the Netherlands when Germany invaded that country in May of the following year, having first invaded Poland. The Nazis introduced more and more laws against the Jews. 5 days after the German invasion of the Netherlands, the Dutch army surrendered and the Nazis started enacting laws and policies that made life unbearable for Jews. Strict regulations were imposed on the Jewish population, and segregated jobs, schools, and public areas became increasingly commonplace. In addition to their father losing his job, Anne and Margaret were compelled to drop out of their current schools and enroll in a Jewish school. The family would also wear a yellow Star of David wherever they went, along with other Jews in the nation. After a curfew that was specially imposed for them started, Jews were unable to travel any place. Locations, including theaters, parks, and non-Jewish stores, were all off-limits. The family had to go into hiding. The Franks sought to emigrate from the Netherlands to the U.S. once again at that time, but were sadly turned away since life had become very terrifying. Edith and Otto both understood that going into hiding was their only choice. Margot's parents were very suspicious when she received a letter on July 5, 1942, ordering her to go to a labor camp in Nazi Germany. This was the necessary blow for them to realize how important it was to keep the family safe. They decided to go into hiding the next day. They were all cramped in the secret place. The Franks were helped by Otto's business partner and his family with their hiding spot, and they lived with them for the next 2 years in secrecy. The location, which was in the annex of his previous business in the Pringersgracht 263, was equipped by them all together. The entrance was difficult to find since it was covertly hidden behind a bookcase. Otto's business partner's family and the Franks family were hidden within, making the space quite small. They would all need to be as silent as possible, and the continual worry of being found was present. She was gifted a diary. In an attempt to elude the Nazis, the Franks left their flat in a state of disarray when they moved out. Otto thought of another idea, sending a message indicating the family was relocating to Switzerland. Anne also determined that it would be better to surrender their family cat to their friend and neighbor to look after, just before the family retreated into their covert hiding place. She hoped that they would protect it until the family could return, so she also gave them a book, a tea set, and a tin of marbles in addition to the cat. Before they went into hiding, Anne also celebrated her 13th birthday. Her favorite gift was a journal, which would become her closest friend for the years to come. The diary would become her companion. She loved to write, so she'd write almost anything in the diary, including short tales, journal entries about her time in hiding, and even quotes from some of her favorite authors. "I hope you will be a great source of comfort and support," she wrote in the diary on the day she was actually given it. "The nicest part is being able to write down all my thoughts and feelings, otherwise I'd suffocate," she wrote in another entry. She wrote everything. Anne would start journaling about everything. She spoke about her imaginary companion, Kitty, a lot, and in some notes she also talked about the terrible prejudice her family was subjected to during the Nazi government. She was motivated to write as much as possible, particularly since the Dutch Minister of Education in England had requested that people save their war diaries and other records. Anne wrote everything on her mind, including several descriptions of how hard it was to live in secret, and she kept on to it. At that moment, the hidden location was home to 8 persons who were unable to leave the hiding spot in order to breathe fresh air and were unable to make any noise. she had her first kiss in the secret place. While having a brief and modest affair with Peter Van Pels, Otto's business partner's adolescent son, Anne had her first kiss during her time in hiding. After spending a great deal of time together, the two of them became close. She wouldn't be quite certain of her emotions for the young Peter, even after sharing her first kiss with him one day. She wasn't sure whether her emotions for him were genuine or just a result of their extended period of time spent together while they were in hiding. She grew closer to her sister. She also became closer to her sister Margot throughout their time in hiding. The two sisters really developed a relationship they'd never known before since they spent so much time together. In her journal, Anne referred to this on January 12, 1944, writing, "She's not nearly so catty these days and is becoming a real friend." It's evident that the two girls had to mature fast while in hiding and turn to one another for love, support, and sisterhood. "She no longer considers me a baby who doesn't count." They had secret aides. All 8 of the persons in hiding received assistance from covert aides since they were unable to leave their hiding place at all. Along with bringing them food, these assistants also served as a conduit for news from the outside world, such as updates on the war and Nazi political maneuvers. These assistants risked their lives to assist the Frank family and others, since they may face legal action for aiding the Jews. In other cases, assistants who assisted Jews in hiding and surviving would even face death. The family was fortunate to have a steady stream of support, which was crucial to their survival. They were eventually discovered. After a while, Anne started compiling her journal entries into a single narrative, continuing to be encouraged by the Minister of Education, who was then living in exile in England. Sadly, Anne would never be able to complete her story because on August 4, 1944, the Nazis would find and arrest her family, the family of her father's business partner, and the dentist who had been hiding together for years. She would name her story Het Achterhuis, or The Secret Annex. They were assisted by 2 assistants who were also taken into custody. To this day, no one knows how the family's secret annex was found. Otto Frank's biographer had one theory. There are a few possibilities about who gave the Nazis information on the family, despite the fact that none of them has been confirmed. The biographer of Otto Frank revealed one of them, implying that Tommy Ehlers, a former participant in the Dutch National Socialist movement, was not without guilt. He also gestured to Wilhelm van Marien, the manager of the stockroom, who was distrusted by the 8 individuals sheltering there. He was totally unreliable since he appeared to be curious about their presence all the time. Nevertheless, there's no evidence that these individuals ever revealed anything about them. Another theory suggests a dark collaboration. Another probable suspect was mentioned in a book by Bep Vascoul-Gilles, one of the aides in the secret annex. According to the biography, Nellie, Bep's sister, was the one who had told on the annex. She was allegedly working with the Nazi dictatorship and opposed her family's efforts to assist Jews flee and endure the oppression. The SS police officer who had received the call that prompted the police to raid the annex corroborated the notion. Karl Silberbauer, the person on the other end of the call, said the other individual sounded like a young lady. The police might have been there for other reasons. Illegal activity is central to the third explanation of who was behind the discovery of the Franks and others. The Anne Frank House, which conducted independent investigations until 2020, proposed that the building's potential for additional illegal activity unconnected to the secret annex drew the attention of the authorities. According to the story, the police were there to look into these illicit activities, but they were finally directed to the annex, where they found the people who were hiding. Nevertheless, it's almost impossible to determine which of these hypotheses is accurate. They were taken to Auschwitz. 2 assistants who had not been caught managed to save portions of Anne's journal despite the violent raid, but everything else in the hidden location was empty. The German security police headquarters would be the first stop on the 8-person journey to Auschwitz. They would ultimately be sent to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and extermination camp after passing through the Westerbork transit camp. One of the two assistants who had been detained with them could get away, while the other would later be freed. They were separated when they got to Auschwitz. The 8 and thousands of others were taken to Auschwitz by rail over 3 days. Packed within the cattle wagons were innocent individuals who were forced to use a barrel as a toilet and had no access to food or water. Due to the gender divide that existed at the concentration camp, Otto would not be reunited with Edith, Anne, or Margot when they arrived in Auschwitz. They were all made to work hard labor while the mother, the 2 girls, and themselves remained together. They would get heavy stones and grass mats daily as retribution for spending so much time hidden. She had her humanity taken away from her. 549 of the passengers on the train who arrived together would be sent straight into gas chambers and killed. This excluded Anne, who would become one of the youngest individuals from that particular shipment to be saved from the death cells, and all children under the age of 15. Anne would think her father had died since they were split up so quickly after arriving at Auschwitz. Anne and the other individuals who were sent to Auschwitz lost their humanity almost immediately, turning them into something very different. Anne and Margot got sick. Along with others, Anne had her clothes taken off, her hair shaved, and one arm tattooed with a number. Scabies will ultimately infect Anne and her sister Margot as a result of the appalling circumstances in Auschwitz. The 2 sisters were sent to an almost empty hospital that was filthy and gloomy. In fact, it was common to witness rats and mice scuttling about and overrunning the area. Edith would finally give up eating to give her daughters, who she thought would survive the infection, her portions because the illness was so awful. The mother died of starvation. For a period, Anne and her mother and sister were housed in the same concentration camp due to the virus. She was supposed to be transferred to a different work camp, but scabies stood in the way. However, their mother remained behind while Anne and Margot finally joined 8,000 other individuals in transport to Bergen-Belsen. On January 6, 1946, Edith starved to death at Auschwitz, around 3 weeks before the Red Army liberated the camp. Anne and Margot died. The 2 sisters joined the bulk of detainees who were Dutch nationals when they arrived in Bergen-Belsen. There was no food, water, sanitation, or warmth, and the living circumstances were as appalling as they could get. The 2 sisters would get ill and catch typhus once again. Margot passed away in February 1945 from weariness and the consequences of the virus, and Anne passed away soon after from the same causes. An additional 17,000 inmates would perish due to the typhus outbreak that had swept across the camp. It would only be a matter of months until the camp was freed. Only Otto survived the camps. The Bergen-Belsen concentration camp was totally destroyed by fire after the inmates were released in order to limit the disease's spread. It's still unclear where precisely Anne and Margot were interred. They were buried among other people in a mass grave. Only Otto, their father, would make it out of the 8 individuals who had been sheltering in the secret annex and go back home. After a protracted voyage, he would return to their Netherlands home to discover that his whole family had perished. Anne's diary was given to her dad. After returning from Auschwitz, Otto stayed with 2 of his acquaintances for around 7 years. He gave Otto Anne's journal from one of his acquaintances. Although he was saddened to read his daughter's reflections because she was no longer with him, her writing undoubtedly had a profound effect on him. Anne wrote in her diary about her desire to become a writer or journalist. Otto's friends persuaded him to consider publishing his daughter's journal since it provided a valuable glimpse into life in the secret annex and was a tribute to her desire. The Secret Annex was published. 3 copies of The Secret Annex were produced and released on June 25, 1947. About the book, Otto would say this: "I started off reading gently, barely a few pages a day. I was too overcome by these sad recollections to have done more. It was a revelation to me. There, the kid I had lost showed herself to be an entirely other Anne. He also said that Margot had become closer to her mother than Anne had, saying, "I had no idea of the depths of her thoughts and feelings." He surmised that it was because Anne was somewhat more outspoken and had greater mood swings than Margot, who tended to keep her emotions to herself. Anne's relationship with her mother was difficult. One of the subjects covered in Anne's journal was this. She revealed how difficult her connection with her mother was in it. When she started editing her writings, however, she did write about her mother in a different manner. She wanted to treat Edith with more respect since she thought she was being a bit too harsh on her. She acknowledged that her mother's anguish during those days was likely much exacerbated by her stress and some of the things she would do and say to her. The book was widely acclaimed. One of the most well-known historical documents is Anne's journal. Eventually, the book was published in an increasing number of editions and translated into 71 other languages. The secret annex was even turned into a movie, with several plays and movies based on it. People from all around the globe, including well-known personalities from numerous nations, praised her. Former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was one of them, praising the book for being written by a young girl, and the young are not afraid of telling the truth. It's one of the wisest and most moving commentaries on war and its impact on human beings that I've ever read. World leaders praised her words. John F. Kennedy, a former U.S. president, also publicly commended Anne for her book, saying that she had the most powerful voice and words of anybody he'd ever seen when it came to human dignity during difficult times. Nelson Mandela did the same after seeing Anne Frank's jail journal. He said that while creating history for himself, the journal had provided him with much encouragement. Later, in 1994, he was given the Anne Frank Foundation's Humanitarian Prize. Anne's words would live on in her journal and in her father's efforts to preserve her legacy. The Anne Frank house became a museum. Until he died in 1980, Otto would publicly announce the news of his daughter for many years. In addition, he would devote hours or even days to answering messages from readers who had been touched by Anne's tale and lived all over the globe. In 1960, the Anne Frank house was converted into a museum with his assistance. The Anne Frank house was supposed to be demolished after World War II, but campaigners battled to rescue the structure on many occasions, and it's still one of the top 3 tourist destinations in Amsterdam today. Her legacy remains intact. Visitors and tourists may see personal belongings preserved by the 8 who resided at the Anne Frank house. Additionally, Anne herself hung numerous pictures of Hollywood stars around the residence. Anne was designated as one of the most important people of the century by Time magazine in 1999, demonstrating the careful preservation of her legacy. Writer Roger Rosenblatt said that Anne could write at almost any age, and her work was exceptional. She was a storyteller, and her ability to be brutally honest appeared to have a great effect on her writing. Anne had big dreams for herself. Anne also wrote in her journal about how much she wanted to accomplish for herself. She aspired to be a journalist and writer, but she also wanted to live a longer life than destiny had granted her. She said, "I need to have something besides a husband and children to devote myself to," in one of the entries, dated April 5, 1944. She was already shattering gender stereotypes and had huge dreams as a young lady. "I want to be useful or bring enjoyment to everyone, even those I've never met," she said in her next words. "I want to continue alive when I pass away." Her legacy will last forever. It seems that her father purposely removed critical material revealed by Anne for a few portions of the journal when it was initially published. Her mother and her strained relationship accounted for most of this, with her newly discovered sexuality playing a smaller role. Eventually, these removed passages were included in the 1952 English version of the diary, as well as a new German copy that was shared in 1950. After her death, Anne would continue to live, if not in the manner she had imagined, and her name would go on to become one of the most prestigious in history. One of the millions of tales, both known and unknown, that demonstrate the beauty of the human spirit shining through the horrors of the Holocaust is Anne's. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon